Hi, everyone, and welcome to the second ever Quiz Bowl Happy Hour podcast. I'm Lewis, and today my co hosts Rohan and Josh will be interviewing what we believe are some strong yet underrepresented circuits across the nation and even internationally. Once again, there will be a transcript to go along with each interview, and timestamps will be made for the start of each interview. We hope you enjoy our podcast, and first up is Florida.
First up, we have Joel Valen of Stanton College Prep in Jacksonville, Florida. Florida has had strong teams before, like Boot Schultz and Stanton College Prep, but has never had a unified circuit throughout the state. Do you know if there have been any efforts to unify the region?
So as far as I know, there's only been one attempt so far in the past 5 years or so to unify the region. It was back in May that we would create an alliance, but the farthest that went was the creation of an Instagram page that went inactive. So at this point, it's mainly four regions in Florida that function independently of each other. So there's the Tallahassee region, which is located in the Panhandle, the Northeast Florida region, which is Jacksonville around Stanton areas. And there's the Orlando region and Tampa region, which are Central Florida, and the Miami region, which is South Florida. Now, each region basically functions independently of each other, as what I said earlier, but a team from each region doesn't actually go to competitions in other regions. For example, a team from, say, Tallahassee rarely would attend a competition that occurred in Northeast Florida or Central Florida. And a team from South Florida would sometimes attend a tournament that is held in Central Florida, but would almost never attend a tournament that's held in Northeast Florida. And so, because of that, there have been problems with unifying the region because all four regions work independently of each other.
Are there other academic competitions that are more prevalent in Florida other than Pyramidal Quiz Bowl?
Okay, so there is actually something that Florida has. It has something called the Commissioner's Academic Challenge, or the CAC, which is actually pretty similar to the NAC, but on a more state level. Basically, how it works is that each district, not each school, chooses 6 players to go to Disney World at the end of the school year, and they basically duke it out there over a weekend or so. And so there are really two main problems with that. One is that the questions aren't really that far from basic trivia, and also the competition sends out a study guide, like a list of works, dates, and stuff like that every year for the competition. And so it makes Quiz Bowl sound like something that you actually have to study for, like a school assignment, whereas it's really not. It's more of an extracurricular activity, something to enjoy in your free time. We also do have a couple of other non-Quiz Bowl academic competitions. We have Mu Alpha Theta and Science Olympiad, both of which are very popular in Florida. Mu Alpha Theta has been, it's usually always hosted in Florida, and the winner is almost always either Buchholz or American Heritage Plantation, both of which are very good in their science programs. We also have Curtamen, which is a Latin competition, and also we have History Bowl. History Bowl is arguably the only Quiz Bowl related competition in Florida that actually sees a lot of talent attend. So we had Robert Muniz, who unfortunately left the Quiz Bowl world some months ago, I believe, at the beginning of this season. We also have Enjo Kunanan from Trinity in Orlando. He's also very good. He placed, I believe, third at the JV competition at the last History Bowl. We also have Sinyu Chung from Gainesville, Buchholz. He's also a very scary history player. He placed fifth at the JVB. And we have Binyam Malaro, who hasn't yet attended. He's from Stanton. He hasn't yet attended a National History B, but for the regional history Bs, he usually does very well. In the 2019 or in the 2018 North Florida History B, Robert Muniz placed third, Binyam placed second, and Enjo Kunanan placed first. And that is actually one of the few competitions that you see people from different regions attend. So History Bowl is generally centralized around the state. There is a following for that.
Do you know if there have been any efforts to bring schools from those non-History Bowl, non-pyramidal competitions into Pyramidal Quiz Bowl?
So I do know that Trinity in 2017 attended an NAQT tournament. However, since 2017, they have not attended any NAQT tournaments so far because Enjo Kunanan, I know he focuses a lot on history and doesn't really focus a lot on literature or science, and Trinity doesn't really have a strong science program. So they mainly focus on history, and it's honestly what they're good at. Buchholz does attend quiz bowl competitions, a couple quiz bowl competitions per year. However, the last time they attended HSNCT was in 2017 when they had a stacked team that still pretty much underperformed, which is why I feel like that was one of the reasons they never decided to go back there. They still do attend the National History Bowl. As for the Commissioner's Academic Challenge, there's really not much that is really related between NAQT and that competition. Teams that are in NAQT sometimes go to the Commissioner's Academic Challenge. I know Stanton does not, for example, and most teams in the state of Florida that are generally good at Quiz Bowl on a national level just don't decide to do that.
Do you know if teams from the Commissioner's Academic Challenge have ever tried Quiz Bowl, or have there been efforts to get them to try Quiz Bowl?
There actually haven't. This is actually something that the Alliance was supposed to do. It was supposed to promote teams that had been going to the Commissioner's Academic Challenge. But one of the main problems we faced with that is that the Commissioner's Academic Challenge uses teams based on district, not by school. So if you wanted to, say, get somebody to try Quiz Bowl, you wouldn't have to go to their school. You'd have to go to their district, because that's the basically who they play under. That's the name they play under. And another thing about the CAC is that it offers monetary prizes, which again kind of takes away from Quiz Bowl. So if someone who's really good at the CAC goes to an NAQT competition and finds out, well, there's no monetary prize, and the only prize there is, you get to know stuff, which honestly is a really rewarding thing in itself. But some people just don't like that. They either want to see their efforts rewarded in a more tangible way. And also, for the CAC, the reason that there hasn't been that much overlap with NAQT is because the questions are, in general, similar. Like Stanton, even if we were offered the opportunity to go to the CAC, we would generally not take it, because the questions are worded in such a way so that the format is rather similar to Science Bowl, but the questions themselves are similar to something you would find on a trivia website or Chip Bowl.
Are there any under the radar teams or players that are starting to get better in the last couple of years?
So actually in 2018 and 2019, there were several teams that got better. One of them was us, Stanton. Another was Ransom Everglades. They're in South Florida from Miami, if I remember correctly. But they are from South Florida, and they have a very young team that's mainly, I think, rising juniors and rising 10th graders, and they are very good at history, especially history. I believe they placed 97th at HSNCT last year. They were the second-ranked team from Florida. Enjo Kunanan and Xingyu Zheng, while they don't really go to the HSNCT, they are a force to look out for at the National History Bee. There's always Midtown Classical, which I know they're young and they usually attend MSNCT, but they're actually really pretty much the only hope for Florida at this point for young quiz bowlers. Stanton had JWJ as a feeder school back in 2014 to 2017, and JWJ actually did very well at MSNCTs. When they had Walker Miller, they placed 12th at the 2014 MSNCT, and in 2016 and 2017, they placed 13th. However, in 2018, that placement went down to 100th place. So we haven't really seen that much talent flow in from middle schools besides the Midtown Collective. Community School of Naples is also pretty good. They are in, if I remember correctly, Bradenton, Florida. So that's pretty close to Tampa. They have a player named Thomas Kralik. We've played him before. He is generally good. He does put up moderately high power counts, and he is good at history. However, lots of the teams that are generally good at Quiz Bowl, either in Florida at least, either don't do Quiz Bowl or have never tried Quiz Bowl.
Any last comments?
Yeah, so Florida is kind of an isolated region. I think a part that has to do with that is the fact that Southern Georgia isn't really a connected circuit to the point that Northern Georgia is. I know, for example, if there were lots of tournaments that were held in Southern Georgia, Stanton would definitely try to attend, but there haven't been any major ones that have been held there yet, besides HSNCT, which was in Northern Georgia. Also, another thing is that Stanton's actually been sending, Florida in general has been sending more teams to HSNCT over the past couple of years. I think we reached a peak of 14 teams that we sent to HSNCT in 2017, but that number went down to 18 in 2018 and back up to 12 in 2019. And this year, we were actually supposed to have several teams attend, and there were going to be several schools that were actually going to send 2 or 3 teams for the first time, one of which would have been
Oh
us.
wow.
But because of the COVID pandemic, there it's kind of basically wrecked interest in Quiz Bowl in Florida, especially because this year was supposed to be a really fledgling year for us. But however, with the COVID pandemic, lots of players have either decided to quit or have just lost interest in the program.
Have there been efforts to get those players to perhaps try practicing or attending tournaments online?
So actually, the Commissioner's Academic Challenge doesn't actually have a dedicated, connected database for example, keeping individual stats or having a connect or for fostering a connection between players. So we actually can't communicate with players who might play the CAC and who might want to try the HSNCT. We actually can't communicate with them because the CAC doesn't foster something like the HSQB forums, or they don't have something like a CAC Discord. Meaning that for the for high school quiz bowl, we have a Discord, we have forums, so people from different regions can easily talk to each other. But the only time you're able to talk with people from other districts is if you go to the CAC. Besides that, the best we can do is email schools and email coaches, but either most of those coaches' emails are outdated on the NAQT website because they haven't been to tournaments in so long, or they just generally don't want to take the risk of, say, going to Atlanta in a possibly pandemic-ridden season.
All right. Thank you so much for coming on and best of luck in the next year. Next, we have with us Coach Todd Garrison from Glasgow High School in Glasgow, Kentucky. What's the status of the Kentucky circuit? What are the active teams and how many tournaments are usually hosted each season?
Hello. Well, in Kentucky, we have 2 organizations, KAAC and KQBA. The Quiz Bowl circuit, KQBA, those of us on that board have been working pretty hard to get organized and we hope to host 3 or 4 virtual tournaments this fall. KAAC is also, I know they've been in talks with Slam In for some systems to try to figure out how to have the Governor's Cup this year. So just like most of us everywhere, things are, kind of up in the air, but we're making progress. The teams that participate in Quiz Bowl in Kentucky at a high level, Glasgow, of course, we do. Woodford County, Paul Lawrence Dunbar, Russell Independent, Henderson County. Those 5 schools have been very, very successful in Quiz Bowl and very active. Throw 2 other schools in there, Danville and Simon Kenton. Those 7 schools, I would say, are the schools that are most likely to not only play in Quiz Bowl, all the Quiz Bowl tournaments in Kentucky, but also travel out of the state, as opposed to playing Quiz Bowl just to kind of prepare for the Governor's Cup. A quick shout out to Simon Kenton, Chris Gerard, longtime coach Simon Kenton. We just lost him this past week to after a battle with leukemia, and he's someone who's been very, very involved both in the Governor's Cup and the Quiz Bowl circuit. So we're going to miss him.
You mentioned the Governor's Cup. What is the Governor's Cup?
So the Kentucky Association for Academic Competition is also known as the Governor's Cup. It's been around since 1986. That's our basically, it's one of the biggest statewide academic competition organizations in the country, with over 200 high schools involved, probably 300 or 400 middle schools, and 600 or 700 elementary schools. It involves written assessments, future problem solving, and quick recall, which is Kentucky's version of Quiz Bowl.
What other forms of academic competition are prevalent in Kentucky?
So the KAAC, as I said, the Governor's Cup, has a district, region, and state competitions every year in January, February, and March. It's frankly, it's as widespread as football or basketball. The quick recall is the closest thing to Quiz Bowl. We have toss-ups and bonuses, but they're not. Every question's 1 point. Every question is designed the same. You read, if you get a toss up, then you get a bonus that bounces back, which is basically exactly like a toss up. We just have a list of questions and we go to the next one. Those have gotten much more pyramidal in
Oh,
recent
nice.
years.
Do you know if there have been any efforts to get some of those Governor's Cup teams to play more pyramidal Quiz Bowl tournaments as we know them?
Yes, most of us who are involved in both Quizbo and Governor's Cup promote, KQBA, which is Kentucky Quizbo Alliance. Like I'm a coach in the Governor's Cup, and I also coach Quizbo. A lot of the Governor's Cup schools that care more about Governor's Cup than Quizbo, will come to Pyramidal Quiz Bowl events in Kentucky. And a lot of it is to practice for the Governor's Cup competition. We've been making a strong effort the last 2 or 3 years to encourage those schools to understand that playing in Quiz Bowl will enhance your success in Governor's Cup. For the matter of fact, I just looked up right before we started. Since 2014, schools that participate in Quizbo have dominated the state competition in quick recall. And if you look at the final 4 teams, 2 or 3 of those 4 are the teams who participate in Quizbo as well.
Oh, nice. That makes sense because doing more pyramidal stuff would definitely help you with the Governor's Cup format. In the
Absolutely.
past,
And practicing Governor's Cup does, it helps with Quiz Bowl as well. Some states have different formats and things, but content is content. So you
yeah,
hear a good question, you're going to learn.
yeah, definitely. In the past, Kentucky has had great players who've often fallen under the radar, like Andrew Kelly and Mason Reed. Are there any such players we should be on the lookout for this coming year?
I've talked about Mason a lot since he was my player, but I do want to take a moment to thank you for bringing up Andrew Kelly. What a great player from Middlesboro. My heart breaks for he and the other seniors in Kentucky who did not get to participate in national tournaments. Leading into the players this year who are, Andrew was a beast, and he was definitely the best player in Kentucky last year. Glasgow was defending our national championships in the small school for 3 straight years, and we didn't get to have that last year. It's definitely we were not going to four-peat. We would have put our money on Russell Independent or Andrew at Middlesboro. And one of the reasons is Russell Independent has 2 players, Ayag Prasad and Jackson Raich, who are rising seniors. They are, again, returning for their senior year this year, and we selected both of those kids to be on our NASAT team this past year as juniors.
Oh, nice.
They're very strong. Ayag's a really good science player who's added literature to his repertoire to make his team better. Jackson is an excellent history player who's a pretty decent generalist. And then Woodford County, they've just been great for several years running. So Woodford, first of all, Keaton Martin, I think, is possibly he's top 5, maybe one of the top 2 or 3 arts players in the country. We chose him for our NASAT team. He came out of nowhere when we were having tryouts for NASAT for 2019. We chose him as a rising, at that time, let's see, he was a rising junior. He just finished his sophomore year because he was such a beast on art and music, just first line powers. And he definitely held his own at NASAT on a team that finished above the median, our Kentucky A team there. He's been writing for tournaments since his sophomore year. So he's written for some sets. So he's really someone to watch this next year. And then also Trevor Wells is another rising senior at Woodford County who is a really good history player, and he's got a little science too. Those are so those 4 kids very well. If you take other than if it weren't for the fact that Andrew Kelly was such a beast last year, those 4 would probably be our starting 4 at NASAT without any of them having been seniors. So those 4 are the ones I'd say to look at. I do want to give a little shout out. There's a lot of other players from a lot of good schools. But Dunbar High School, Paul Lawrence Dunbar, has had some really good players over the years. And there's a young lady named Daksha Pillay who's she will be a rising sophomore this year, who performed very well at our state championship last year for NAQT and really surprised us at our individual tournament as well. So those are some folks to look for.
Any last comments?
Just keep your eyes out for we run 2 tournaments at Glasgow High School now each year. One is the Scotty, which we've been running for 5 or 6 years now, and the other we just started last year is the Jesse Brown Small School Showcase. The Scotty will be hosted virtually this year on September the 19th. We are full at 36 teams, and with 7 on the wait list. We got teams from as far as Texas and, of course, Detroit Catholic and all over the place. Love to have some moderators from around the country. Here's be an opportunity to. We're probably the largest full-on high school virtual tournament this early this year, with bonuses and everything. Give me an email. Email me at todd.garrison@glasgow.kyschools.us if you're interested in helping us out. Otherwise, be on the lookout.
All right. Thank you so much for the efforts that you've done with outreach in Kentucky, and best of luck in the next year. Next, we're going to be talking with Jay Winter, a teacher at Waukee High School in Iowa who has been instrumental in building a relatively new circuit in the state. How have you been able to attract more schools in the Pyramidal Quiz Bowl?
First of all, thanks for having me. I think it's just been a little bit at a time where we've taken some opportunities. When I first moved here in 2014, my team or my school did not have a quiz bowl team, and after all my experience of coaching in Illinois, I was able to put a team together, and we went to an NAQT tournament at Drake and did pretty well. And I thought, okay, well, it doesn't do me much good to put a team in if there's not opportunities to play. So that's where the Iowa Quiz Bowl League came in, and we started working with NAQT as well as some other question writers that do Pyramidal Quiz Bowl. And it's been slow but steady, and it's been very successful over the course of 5 years. And I think the biggest thing for us was an opportunity fell in our lap right away when we had a chance to get involved in the production of a television show up in Sioux City. And when that took off and our opportunity kind of landed in our lap there, we just ran with it. And the sponsor was saying, we may not have a show this year because the person who did it walked away from that responsibility. It was about a 15-second conversation I had with myself. I said, we either do the show or there's no quiz bowl. So,
how similar is this show to Pyramidal Quiz Bowl?
We use NAQT questions, but it's not terribly pyramidal. It's their TV packets that we use, and we put their questions in through some different formats, like just toss-ups and one-part bonuses and lightning rounds as well.
Do you think that has prepared teams for Quiz Bowl tournaments as we know them?
I think it helps because the way those particular questions are structured, it kind of has a little bit of a pyramidal feel to it without being horribly lengthy. Most of those questions run about 2 sentences or maybe 3 clues. And some students get them on the early clue, and some students get them on the giveaway clue.
Makes sense. Are there other people who have helped you in this outreach effort who'd like to talk about?
Yeah, it's been a bit of a struggle in that department at times, but I've got probably 3 or 4 coaches that I could rely upon to help me with like hosting regional tournaments or supporting things like our trip to NASAT last year. and it's going to take time because unfortunately, when you're a teacher and you're a quiz bowl coach, everybody's busy, and the ones that have a lot of family commitments and a lot of different things going on in their life, it's really hard to get them to buy in even just a little bit more at times.
Yeah, there's always a problem with getting teachers to consistently show up to tournaments and supervise the students. You mentioned that you organized the first ever team from Iowa to go to NASAT last year. What was that experience like, and what effect do you think it had on the circuit as a whole?
I'll take that in reverse order if I can. I think the effect that it had on the circuit was huge because it was sort of like, here's Iowa taking the next step, and
Yeah, definitely.
having co-coached Team Illinois from 2012 to 2014 with Sharon Lorinskas from Carbondale. Um, that experience prepared me very much for what to expect at NASAT. And I knew that, the organization and the tournament had undergone some changes over time since that first coaching experience. But um, the biggest thing that I think our kids and my co-coach Nathan Combs from Ankeny High School and myself, I think the biggest thing we took away from that was the fact that you're here, you're welcomed, we want you to do better. Good luck. Now, when we ran into Team Ohio and they ran over us like we were standing still, of course that's going to happen. but they also have outstanding players, and they have terrific, they have a terrific, well-established circuit that's been going on for a long time, and to get it to that level, it's just going to take time. It doesn't happen overnight. As far as the experience goes, I was thrilled to death. I mean, it was a terrific experience. I really thoroughly enjoyed being around a lot of people that I know from the Quiz Bowl community, and I think the fact that they were able to see that we're able to start making that next step was something really important. And we were really looking forward to possibly going back this year, but obviously with the pandemic, that kind of stopped everybody's plans.
Do you know if any of the Iowa teams will have plans to travel out to more established circuits like Minnesota or Illinois when in-person tournaments return?
I think so. I can speak for my students at Waukee and say yes. We would like to do that. We've gone up to the tournament at University of Minnesota in the Twin Cities, and we've been to we went to Pace when it was in Chicago, and we went to a tournament in Northern Illinois at NIU that was run by some friends of mine, and the support there was also fantastic from those particular groups. Um, but it also depends on the teams themselves. I mean, if it depends on your compete level. I mean, if you're just looking to win your conference, then maybe you don't necessarily need to take that next step to try to branch out. But when we started going to other tournaments in 2017, it was honestly because we ran out of people to beat in Iowa. Waukee was just beating everybody in sight, and we needed new competition. We needed to go up against the Wayzatas and the Eden Prairies and the the Rockford Auburns and the other teams that have had such great success.
Hmm. Any last comments?
This has been a labor of love for me. The Iowa Quiz Bowl League has, and it's a work in progress, and it continues to be. I'm really fortunate that I'm surrounded with a lot of coaches that support the activity and want to do more. And I think there's always more that can be done, but at the same time, we're still kind of finding our way into the calendar here. Show choir and speech and music events; those are all huge on the calendar here in Iowa, and trying to fit in another activity like Quiz Bowl is a bit of a challenge, but we're finding our niche. We're doing everything we could be doing. Could we be doing more? Probably, but there's only one of me. so that's what makes it kind of challenging. But to bring this into the state and to make it something viable has been it's really rewarding to see it happen, and it's really rewarding to get the buy-in of some of my fellow coaches, I think probably another one of the biggest things was when we had Josh Rutsky and Eric Huff from Quiz come up last fall and do a coaches clinic just for coaches. So we probably had 8 to 10 coaches in my classroom at Waukee High School while their kids were playing a tournament. And here's Eric and Josh coming up from the Southeast to visit and trying to help grow the game a little bit more. So hopefully we get more of that, a little bit more exposure and a little bit more support from the outside as much as the inside. And I think that's the way we're going to keep pushing. And hopefully we will be in a position where we can start competing at a higher level at national tournaments for individual schools and also at NASAT.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for all the work that you've done for the Iowa circuit, as well as for being on this podcast, and best of luck in the next season. Next, we'll be sitting down with Matt Mitchell, an incoming graduate student at Yale who did his undergrad at the University of Colorado. I noticed that there seem to be only 1 to 2 tournaments a year in Colorado. Is there a reason behind this, and what have teams done to prepare for nationals in spite of it?
Well, that's an interesting question. And by interesting, I mean kind of embarrassing, actually. So in the past few years, all of the effort of planning the circuit has been sort of landed on my shoulders. And what that meant was we only had as many tournaments as I had time to plan. Now, because we have to manage both the college and high school circuit, like we're the only college quiz bowl team in Colorado, it's all on us. And because I have to host a certain number of college tournaments to ensure that we can even have players, we just didn't really have that much time to host. Now, this is actually changing. We've started to get a ton more hosting buy-in from schools. Grand Junction, in fact, hosted their own tournament just last fall, I believe. I think it was in the fall. And we've started to host more tournaments a year. We were planning on doing either 3 or 4 in the 2019 to 2020 school year, but of course, COVID happened. So as for the second part of your question, what have teams done to prepare for nationals? That's, well, yes, that is kind of a challenge. We actually don't have a ton of teams that have really stepped up to that level. The main exceptions being Grand Junction, Boulder High, and Fort Collins. But mostly it's through the online Quiz Bowl community.
Oh, really? So the Colorado teams have been playing online tournaments regularly or semi-regularly?
Well, not a ton of actual tournaments, and still it's only been a couple of schools, but there have been a lot of like online practice and scrimmage sessions, at least for the local circuit. In fact, often our players will hold either joint practices or just do PKs back and forth in Discord with the Boulder High team, which has been really fun for both of us. Because one of the hardest things about like maintaining a Quiz Bowl team in an isolated circuit is that if you're already at the top, it's very hard to see what sort of rewards your efforts to improve can get. And if you're already at the top in a small circuit, that's often not very high. So it's often very hard to keep motivated to improve from tournament to tournament. And when there's only a few tournaments a year, it can be 4 to 6 months before you see any results for your efforts. And that's where the online Quiz Bowl community is really helpful. What's great about, I mean, personally, that's what's allowed me to become a half-decent science player. And at least on the Boulder High team and the Fort Collins team, so many of, well, in the case of the latter, it's just one guy, but they've gotten really good just through online packets, PKs, practicing, reading, and just trying to like see how good they can do on a certain packet rather than how good they can do against the local field.
Oh, you mentioned Boulder High and other schools. Are there any up-and-coming schools or players that you'd like to shout out?
Well, at the high school level, definitely Boulder High. So Jake Boonin, who's the captain of the team there, has done a ton of work. He's actually the outreach director of Colorado Quiz Bowl now. which good for him. He really deserves it. And he's doing a ton of work to improve outreach, particularly online outreach, over the next year. Beyond that, Grand Junction has been, I believe they're the first high school to ever host a Pyramidal Quiz Bowl tournament in Colorado. And they're a long-running team. They're a huge team. They send people to HSNCT, I believe, every year for the past few years, which is really great. And they are working to expand the circuit on the Western Slope.
What do you think is important in order to get schools like Grand Junction to buy in to start hosting more tournaments?
Well, I think trying to sort of at least get the schools playing Pyramidal Quiz Bowl, make sure they have a large enough club to host tournaments, which really just takes time. And also, like, try to form a personal relationship with the people at the schools, make sure make sure they have input on things, make sure you give them all the advice that they need. And really, it's just make sure they come to Pyramidal Quiz Bowl tournaments and have a good time while they're there, because Quiz Bowl's awesome. And because Quiz Bowl is awesome, if you start playing it regularly, you're gonna want to do at least something to expand it. At least that's been my experience.
How has the Colorado high school Quiz Bowl circuit grown in the past few years?
So we actually haven't seen a lot of growth, but there's been some. I think what we've seen more, like, I believe that there are only a few schools that are playing now that weren't playing 3 years ago. Fort Collins is definitely one, as is Regis Jesuit and Colorado Early College's Aurora. Really, it's been more about the established teams it's been more about getting more buy-in from the established teams. So like Boulder High helping with outreach, Grand Junction helping with outreach and both hosting their own tournaments. You've got Henry at Fort Collins, who just studied a ton and became a really good player and forced everyone else to step up their game. So really, we're starting to see sort of not necessarily the size, although we're hoping that increases in the future, but the sort of level of involvement. It's a really heartening thing to see the level of involvement increasing over time.
Yeah, that's really good. Is there anything more you'd like to say?
I think that because we're in the West, we face sort of unique challenges due to like transportation, like just the density of schools, and that's more at the college level. And I think one of the main things holding tournaments back in Colorado is that, it's less about the fact that Knowledge Bowl exists or the or just the sparsity of high schools, but it's really about the sparsity of colleges, because there's just not a lot of colleges out west, except for like on the West Coast. So in the Mountain West, you really the whole work of organizing a circuit is going to fall on one or two teams in a given state. Like in Idaho, that's Boise State. Oh, I really should shout out Colin McNamara there for both like maintaining a team and being the reason I got into Quiz Bowl. Like if Idaho had not had a circuit, Colorado would not have a circuit now.
Wow.
And really, it's just going to take a lot more time, because we really need buy-in from the high schools out here to even have a sizable circuit. It's just not scalable if the colleges are the only people hosting, because there's so few of them.
All right. Thank you so much for all the work that you've done for the Colorado circuit, and thanks for coming on the podcast. Next, we'll be talking with Justin Zhang, formerly from Newport High School, Yu Chen Lee of Tesla STEM High School, and Kobe Tran of Westview High School, all quiz bowlers from the Pacific Northwest, which has an interesting developing circuit. So, how has the PNW circuit progressed over the years, and what teams will likely maintain an active program in the years to come?
So, there's been a somewhat constant stream of tournaments being run at the University of Washington in the past few years. However, they are running more and more tournaments every year. I think this year they're planning to run 3 tournaments. If the last one wasn't canceled because of COVID. And I hope Tesla STEM will definitely be participating in Quiz Bowl in the future. I know Redmond has a pretty strong program as well as Newport, at least here in Washington. Kobe, do you have anything to add in Oregon?
Yeah, so WestU, again, I hope will keep sending teams to the UW invite and hopefully qualify for HSNCT. Aloha High School, I know, is building up their program. They have an invitational here too, or like they did, except COVID. Um, and I think that's all from Oregon, but I've heard rumors about other schools starting Quiz Bowl programs, but I can't attest to the validity of those.
I guess I can add on to you, Chen, about the Washington State circuit. So like in the past, it used like Lakeside was I think the first high school program that probably started Quiz Bowl, a Quiz Bowl team, and they've been consistently like sending teams like each year. And so I think like Lakeside will definitely be present next year. Interlake, Pavan is he was a freshman at Interlake last year, and he came from Kentucky, and like but he like started the Quiz Bowl team there, and since he's a freshman, I'm pretty sure like the Interlake team, they'll definitely be coming next year. And then I'm pretty sure Pavan, hopefully he can like create like he can institutionalize a long-standing team that can come for like many years. And also, oh, Eugen, you said Redmond already, yeah. And I hope Newport. I'll try to push the people for this year to start coming to more tournaments, and hopefully they'll also do online too.
Do you know anything about the Idaho circuit?
The Idaho circuit, it's mainly run by so Colin McNamara. He heads like the Idaho Quiz Bowl League, I think that's what it's called there, and he is trying to. There weren't that many high school teams, but I think he successfully recruited at least like 2 or 3, and I think he said like this year maybe, or if it wasn't for COVID, like this year maybe they would have come to the UW Invitationals.
All right. What other forms of academic competition are prevalent in the Pacific Northwest, and have there been efforts to bring those schools into Pyramidal Quiz Bowl?
So Science Bowl has always been pretty big in the Pacific Northwest, I think. I know several high schools in the region participate in Science Bowl, and I think only recently have the big Science Bowl schools like Redmond and Interlake have started expanding into Quiz Bowl. And Justin can talk about Knowledge Bowl, which is also pretty big in Washington.
Yeah, so like Knowledge Bowl, Washington's divided into like 11 districts, and each district does like their own regional Knowledge Bowl competition in the spring, and then they eventually combine for like the state Knowledge Bowl championships. So actually Newport High School, we only started like Quiz Bowl in my sophomore year, which is 2 years ago. But before that, we were like primarily a Quiz Bowl club since like the 1990s at least. So that's how we got into Quiz Bowl. And then also Interlake, they're really strong in Knowledge Bowl and Science Bowl. But like recently, in addition to Pavan's team, like one of the Science Bowl players from Interlake actually joined with Pavan, and they actually won the last tournament that UW hosted. And also, I have been when I went to the Knowledge Bowl regionals last year, they had like a roster that listed like all the teams. For the Newport, the tournament that Newport hosted, the novice one, I did try to reach out to like the principals of all the schools and like say like, hey, like we know your school does Knowledge Bowl, and we're hoping like you could also come to some of our Quiz Bowl tournaments. It's similar format to Knowledge Bowl, and we hope you can like find this as like good practice for like the Knowledge Bowl championships.
And has there been any resistance to that, or how have the schools responded usually to those types of emails?
Some of the like some of the teams have been open to do it, but I I think I ended up sending the email a little too close to our novice tournament, so not that many teams came back with like a confirmation saying they would come. I think like schools such as like Odea High School, they did come, and they thought it was like real. They thought like the Quiz Bowl tournament was really fun, and I'm hoping to like convince more of these schools to join the Quiz Bowl circuit.
Are there any specifically strong players or teams in the circuit that may have fallen under the radar?
So I think Justin already mentioned Pavan. He was really solid at the fall tournament that I went to. Also, Aloha has Robert Young. I think he got like 40, 50 PPG. And considering that he didn't really, like, he didn't study as much as he is studying now, considering that, he's, I think, definitely a name to watch out for next competition season.
There is a middle schooler that I actually met recently. It's he goes to Willows Prep Middle School. I think it's like a private middle school in the Redmond school district. But I believe he was an eighth grader last year, so he'll be entering high school this year. But he did go to the individual player national championship tournament in both his seventh and eighth grade. Or wait, he can't go eighth grade because of COVID. But like I think he does put a lot of work into it, and I think he'll actually shine pretty well in the high school circuit when he starts playing for the high school circuit. I forgot to mention his name. I think it was I forget his first name, but his last name was Tanisha.
All right. Thank you so much for your time and best of luck in the next season.
So up next, we have Joshua Rutsky, the former head coach of Hoover High School in Hoover, Alabama, and he's now currently the president of the Alabama Scholastic Competitions Association. So, like, which teams in Alabama are super active, and which of them could stand out as a possible contender on, like, the national circuit next year?
Well, that's an interesting question. We have a number of teams that are very active now up in the Huntsville area and in the Madison area. In particular, we've had some very good schools come out of there. James Clemens High School has a extraordinarily good team. Their team from middle school moved up this past year, and this is the same team that finished fourth at middle school national. So they're going to continue to improve over the next couple of years. They, I think, are going to be all 10th graders this year and should be very competitive. I know that they've been continuing to work together and have been together as a group of 4 or 5 kids now for, I guess, 5 or 6 years, and you can build a lot of team unity that way.
All right, so are there any, like, individual players that could really stand out this year?
Well, the one that comes to mind, probably the strongest player in Alabama right now, if I had to put my finger on somebody, that would probably be Kapil Nathan.
Yeah.
He is a very, very strong player. I've actually watched him from middle school and coached him for a year, as well as watching him in the recent years playing for Hoover. And he just continues to bully his way through every corner of the distribution and pick up more and more on the side. At some point, I'm sure there will be a point where he can no longer absorb more content, but he isn't there yet. And I think that the only limit that Kapil has is his ability to learn how to work together with the other members of his team and build toward a national title as a team. I think it's really hard for individuals to win national titles. Obviously, it's been done, but I think that that's a very, very challenging goal for anybody.
Yeah, so how has the Alabama circuit grown in the last couple of years in terms of, like, outreach?
Well, one of the things that people don't really recognize about Alabama is that it's a really big state. East to west, it's traversable in 3 to 4 hours, but north to south, it's a good 7 hours from tip to tip. And so Quiz Bowl up in the northern part of the state has traditionally been isolated from Quiz Bowl in the southern part of the state until you get to the state championship level. And as a result of that, there's a central band in what we call the Rust Belt of relatively underserved, academically challenged areas with very little funding, thanks to Alabama's archaic tax laws. And those teams have been sort of left behind in the move toward a more talented state. So one of the things that we set out to do with ASCA was connect up the Southern Quiz Bowl grouping and the Northern grouping by trying to bring in some of the organizations that had formed down in the Mobile area and some of their constant tournament groupings into the state. What we saw was that there were local organizations in the lower half of the state, in Mobile and other areas, and we were able to reach out to them and make them district tournaments where they were having their own local tournaments at the end of the season. We reached out to them and got them involved and said, well, hey, be a member of ASCA, be a part of this. We'll make your tournament a district tournament. We'll provide you with the questions. You will save money, and your teams will get a chance to move on to the state level if they choose to. And through that kind of relationship building, we were able to do a lot of good things.
That's great. And are there any like non-pyramidal academic competitions in Alabama? And have there been efforts to like move from those competitions to pyramidal Quiz Bowl?
Well, for quite some time, Alabama was non-pyramidal. We actually had a rocket scientist, literally from the Huntsville area, who was writing the state tournament questions some 12 years ago, and it took a long time to sort of get through to people who had played on non-pyramidal questions for years and years and years that pyramidal questions didn't mean impossible questions, and that the experience that my players had when they first started playing pyramidal questions, which was to get overwhelmed at the first tournament, but also to feel like, wow, these are real questions, and we are actually playing Quiz Bowl. And it's not just who can recall, a spelling question fastest. That really changed their view about Quiz Bowl. It was a challenging thing because we really had to convince people that their teams would not only be able to get to the level of other teams that were playing Quiz Bowl at the pyramidal style, but we also had to convince them that they would enjoy it more. And I think that it really surprised a lot of the older coaches in our circuit how much their players enjoyed pyramidal Quiz Bowl more than they enjoyed the Speed Bowl.
Yeah. So are there any like last comments you want to add before we conclude?
Yeah, I think that I would really like to just say to, the national Quiz Bowl world that one of the reasons why, it's very challenging for teams in places like Alabama and other places that are a little more out of Quiz Bowl centered zones to compete is that we don't get the opportunity to get out of state and compete with other teams very often. There's not a lot of funding for that, and that's something that's true at every level of the game. But because of that, I think it's really important for tournament directors in major areas where Quiz Bowl is very prominent. The more teams that are out there and getting involved, the better everybody gets a Quiz Bowl nationally. And I think it's just in everybody's best interest to build that excitement. If you've got the resources to make it happen for another state near you, and you've got the facilities, then you sort of have a moral obligation to try and make that possible and give the people in those areas an opportunity to enjoy what you care about so much.
All right. Thanks for having a great interview with us, and good luck with ASCA in the next season. So next, we're talking with Joel Miles, a rising senior at Raymore Peculiar High School in Missouri. And I know that Ladue has been a perennial national powerhouse for the last decade or so, but it seems that many other schools in the state are overlooked. What are some other schools that could really stand out next year in Missouri?
Well, aside from Ladue, who I do think are probably going to be the top team in the state again this year, there are a number of schools that are probably going to show up to a lot of tournaments and do very well. I think the first one that you have to mention is the St. Louis Patriots, who have obviously top freshmen in the country this past season, Owen Farah, and Sam Lindsay, who won the Missouri site of the National History Bee last year. And they could easily take tournaments off of Ladue. I believe they're primarily an ACF focused team, though, so wouldn't expect them at many NAQT events.
Yeah. And also, so like Missouri's a relatively large state with like the two largest cities, Kansas City and St. Louis, being on opposite sides. So like how has this affected both outreach and the ability to go to tournaments for some teams?
Well, most of the stronger teams in the state do get out and go to things. You'll see teams like Washington, Hallsville, several counties away from where they're actually based. Same for like St. Joseph Central, some of those teams. However, there are a huge amount of teams in the state that probably nobody's ever heard of outside of Missouri. And they don't really like study or go to anything besides MISHA events, which is our state organization. And they're usually pretty low quality and not nearly as good MISHA events. So we definitely try to get those schools out. And MoQBA, which is our Quiz Bowl Alliance, is trying to start tournaments in regions that are really, really populated but don't have many good tournaments. So like Southern Missouri, where they have tournaments in Joplin at College Heights and Tuscumbia. And in the Kansas City metro, where you'll see tournaments at like Fort Osage and North Kansas City. Underfunding is also a big problem, and some teams have that problem. I think that maybe Raymore Peculiar is one of the most notable teams that has trouble with that, which is my school. Online, I suspect, will help that because I know that a lot of those teams that don't get out much are very good and probably will want to go to online events.
So there are any like other non-pyramidal academic competitions like you were talking about that are prevalent in Missouri, and like how have outreach efforts to schools playing those? Like how have they gone?
Well, there's not really non-pyramidal quiz bowl per se. I would say that Mish's format, while it's not good and often features like two-part bonuses and other non-standard stuff, bounce backs, that kind of thing, it remains pyramidal. However, there are some private schools that only really play Science Bowl. I think you would know about that. And there are also a couple of Kansas City schools that are right on the state line, namely Barstow and Van Horn. And Barstow, in fact, has been good at regular Quiz Bowl in the past, but have lately been even going into Kansas to play speed check sets, and Kansas's rules are just really generally not good. But outreach to those schools, again, MoQBA is doing their best. Really good organization.
Yeah. So are there any standout individual players who could surprise on a national level next year?
Well, I would say Gabe, but at this point, I don't think that that would be much of a surprise. I suppose the two individuals you would really have to highlight on this front would be from Kirksville. We have Fred Garvey, who I think is rapidly improving and will probably put up a ton of powers the first tournament he plays. Kirksville in general is getting a lot better, and if they actually go to things, which they really didn't last year, they will definitely impress a lot of people. And another player that I see potentially blowing up and scoring a lot of points this year is a guy named Riley Nash, who goes to North Kansas City. North Kansas City was one of the top teams in the state last year. Their top scorer, Ryan, graduated, though. And I think that Riley is the most likely candidate to fill that scoring gap because I played with him at EFT, and he had a number of very, very good buzzes and powered on EFT a number of times. So I think that if he studies, he absolutely has the capacity to be very, very good.
All right. So anything else before we close out?
I think the most important thing to note is that despite COVID, we're probably still going to have a pretty good online circuit in Missouri, from what I've heard. So yeah, I look forward to the season.
All right. Yeah. Good luck in next season, and thanks for coming on. So up next, we have Aditya Patel, who's a rising junior at Hamilton High School in Chandler, Arizona. So what does the Arizona circuit currently look like? How has it grown over the years? Who are the strong teams? And do any people really stand out as someone that could be a national contender this year?
The Arizona Quiz Bowl circuit is not very large by any means, but monthly tournaments make the game very accessible in Arizona. There are two primary organizations that run Quiz Bowl tournaments in Arizona yearly. the AQA, or Arizona Quiz Bowl Association, and the West Valley Quiz Bowl League offer a lot of quiz bowl throughout the school year. AQA tournaments are hosted at ASU and often have way harder fields than the West Valley Quiz Bowl League. The West Valley Quiz Bowl League is hosted by Brophy or Verado, and they're reluctant to really come to AQA tournaments. There is also an annual TV show tournament that's run by Phoenix CW. And in terms of teams in Arizona, strongest teams in the circuit for the 2020-2021 season should be Basis Scottsdale, Hamilton, Basis Awatuki, and Herberger. Basis Scottsdale and Basis Awatuki have like scary good specialists and are always fun to play in the sense that like you enjoy seeing some of the buzzes they get. The Clark brothers at Basis Scottsdale are both really good history players, and I've got to play both of them at NHBB and QB Quiz Bowl tournaments. Out of the more active teams in Arizona last year, Hamilton was undoubtedly the best, but Brophy led by Chris Newry was the best when you talk about like in the state. Brophy just didn't play a lot in the state of Arizona. While Hamilton lost 3 players on their A team, there are many returning members and were enthusiastic of the challenge that awaits. In terms of national contenders, Herberger should be on everyone's top 3 projections list because they're just insanely scary to play. As middle scores, I think they're all in 7th grade. They beat Hamilton A once, and they've regularly beaten other high school teams that have been around for a long time too, and it's only their first year of playing Pyramidal Quiz Bowl.
So, talking about Pyramidal Quiz Bowl, like what are the main non-pyramidal academic competitions that are prevalent in Arizona, and how have like efforts to bring schools into Pyramidal Quiz Bowl gone?
Arizona has a lot of rural pyramidal, non-pyramidal tournaments and stuff, but like in the Phoenix metro area, much of the recruiting that comes from Pyramidal Quiz Bowl tournaments hasn't really paid off. From what I know, I'm pretty sure that others have contacted those teams who go to the non-pyramidal tournaments, but it's just difficult, I guess, because the Arizona circuit's been traditionally small. The only other Quiz Bowl teams also play Science Bowl, and that's a big thing in Arizona, but that's dominated by Basis Chandler, and the Basis schools basically battle it out, but Hamilton and among other schools also compete in that.
Okay, and how has like the Arizona circuit grown in the past few years? Like, are there any like new schools that have like really shown up, like the Herberger that you were talking about?
Yeah, so a lot of the 2 new schools that came, or the 3 new schools that came into Quiz Bowl this year in Arizona, from what I know, is Basis Awatuki, who they came to state last year, but that was their only tournament, and then they're quite good for a second year team. They have a good fine arts specialist, and they have a good history player who I got the privilege to play with in NHBB, so it's always fun playing them. Herberger is all 7th graders, and they traveled to SoCal this year to play in a middle school tournament, and they were very good against the stack field there, so that shows that they're not only good in Arizona, but good in other states as well. And then Mountain View came to a couple tournaments, and they are looking to come back next year as well.
So yeah, are there any like strong players in the Arizona circuit that you think that'll be good next year?
Strong players in the Arizona circuit that I believe will be good to great next year include Arthur Yang and Omkar Arasaya. They're both Arthur is a great Chio and current events player, so he does great on AQT sets, but his true talent in history wasn't shown because he played on the same team as another very good history player in Arjun Gadiar. He's also a very clutch player, and it's a pleasure to work with him in co-founding Hamilton's NHBB club. Omkar is a great generalist, and he was my Quiz Bowl teammate for almost the whole year, so he's a great sportsmanship, and he's always very clutch. And the last guy I am gonna mention is JP Tate from Herberger. He is a insane history player. He's regularly outbuzzed some of the best history players in Arizona as a seventh grader, and that's what I find really inspirational and impressive about him.
All right, well, that's it for our podcast right today, and thanks for joining us, and good luck next season. All right, so next we have Christopher Shin, formerly of the Seoul International School in South Korea, and he's headed to Brown University this year. So, what does the Quiz Bowl situation look like in South Korea? Are there other teams that attend tournaments, and how has Quiz Bowl been around in South Korea?
So, in order to discuss how Quiz Bowl looks like in South Korea now, I think we should begin by discussing how it began in the first place. Academic quiz in Korea is derived from IAC's International History Bowl and B, just because they were more focused on targeting the Asian market much earlier than NAQT. This is why a lot of history and humanities players involved in Quiz Bowl right now in South Korea, including my teammates on the A team, are also participants of the History Bowl and B. Quiz Bowl and IHBB are limited to just international schools in South Korea. So far, the schools that are involved are Seoul International School, Seoul Foreign School, Korea International School, and Yongsan International School of Seoul, with each school fielding about 2 to 5 teams. And as you can see, it's a fairly limited circuit with only 4 schools involved. Starting next year, however, academic quiz will be considered a kayak sport, which means that even more international schools will be involved from now on. Kayak stands for the Korean American Interscholastic Activities Conference, and it is an organization that facilitates a wide variety of extracurricular competitions between schools that ranges from sports to even music and debate tournaments. And I know for a fact that Chadwick International is able to field an IHBB roster, while I have also heard rumors of a team being created in Daejeon Christian International School. So these two teams are almost confirmed to be joining the circuit next year. Korean Quiz Bowl, without a doubt, features a small circuit, but it will expand rapidly this coming school year.
All right, so how did you guys learn about Quiz Bowl? Is it basically through IHBB, or did NAQT outreach to you guys?
Well, 2 of our members are involved in IHBB, Ryan Kim and Edward Lee, and also David Suh, who is also part of the A team. All 3 of them are involved in IHBB. I personally wasn't a part of IHBB, but I think Quiz Bowl at our school just mainly began as a result of the History Bowl community. And anyway, our school, Seoul International School, wasn't actually involved in Quiz Bowl to begin with. The first 2 schools to get involved were Seoul Foreign School and Korea International School. The coach of Seoul Foreign School, Mr. Michael Harvey, has a lot of years of experience under his belt, having coached teams like Shanghai American, Singapore American, and the Community School of Naples in the past. And he was an advocate for starting up the Korean Quiz Bowl circuit. And since he got in contact with NAQT, along with many other teachers in international schools that are able to coach teams, we were able to begin the Korean circuit that way. And since the international schools in Korea that are considered the big 3 are Seoul Foreign, Korea International, and finally Seoul International, it was only a matter of time until we also made a team for ourselves. Emily Bay and Fiona Cho, 2 students in our class who had connections with the other international schools, took the opportunity to introduce Quiz Bowl to our school administration. And ever since about March of 2019, we have been functioning as an unofficial academic quiz club at our school, being big enough to field about 4 teams at any given tournament.
All right, so what major differences have you noticed between Quiz Bowl in South Korea and then Quiz Bowl in America?
Personally, I don't believe that there are many massive differences between Korean and American Quiz Bowl. The idea of having competitions based on a variety of academic subjects with a buzzer on each player's hand is absolutely the same. However, there are a few aspects that American Quiz Bowl does better that I like to see in the Korean circuit as well in the future. Firstly is the availability of tournaments. The bureaucratic nature of international school administration in Korea makes it quite complicated to have multiple tournaments a month. Organizing facilities and staffers for each tournament is an incredible hassle that requires months of planning beforehand just to get everything approved. And that makes it very difficult for tournaments to be held more frequently. As I've mentioned previously, though, academic quiz is now considered a sport supported by kayak, and this will for sure allow the Korean circuit to host more tournaments among themselves. On top of this, I have been working as a part of a new organization called the Asian Academic Quiz Alliance, which will hopefully consolidate the schools in Asia that are currently involved in either NAQT or IHBB quiz, and also attempt to provide outreach to those schools that may have the interest but not the infrastructure to start such academic quiz teams. This organization, led by coach Harvey and former NAQT member Joyce Sun, along with current college students like Bo Yang Ho from Singapore, who currently attends the University of Cambridge, will bring together schools across the continent so that even more schools can compete together in a game we all love so much. What this means for Korean Quiz Bowl in particular is that schools will be able to travel to other countries like Singapore and China so that they will be able to compete much more frequently and in a more efficiently organized manner. Currently, there's just not enough exposure to tournament play in Korea, which is one of the primary obstacles preventing Korean Quiz Bowl from becoming more developed. The second aspect that I'd like to see improved in Korean Quiz Bowl is the variance in the types of tournaments that are hosted. Korea has been sticking primarily to NAQT packets, which in my opinion has a distribution that features a bit too much pop culture and computational math. And even though NAQT kindly provided us with Asianized packets which tone down on the purely American aspects of pop culture, I would love to see the Korean circuit experiment with a wider variety of packet sets. From what I've read in the packet archives and from what I've heard on the Discord server, I would have loved to play house rights such as HFT, Blast, and Callisto this year. Looking back on this year, we only played 3 tournaments total. 1 A-level set, 1 invitational series, and the 2019 Scotty for the online Asian Championships. And I would like to see a wider range of difficulty being played in Korea in the coming years.
All right, so you guys traveled like a long way to HSNTT in Atlanta last year. How was your experience at that, and does your team plan to attend next year?
The 2019 HSNCT was an excellent experience for the entire A team. I mean, since we were not even sure we were going to be attending it up until maybe a month before the tournament, our school didn't end up sponsoring us for the trip. Nevertheless, Coach Harvey from Seoul Foreign School generously decided to help us out and took us to Atlanta last May, and we were able to compete. I must say though that our lack of experience was readily apparent in comparison to all the other strong teams there, having only played maybe 1 A-set tournament before the HSNCT itself. Despite this, we had quite the strong showing at HSNCT, going 6-4 in prelims, and eventually getting knocked out by Phillips Academy in the first round of playoffs, placing us at 97th. I wholeheartedly believe that if we had gone this year, we would have placed at least a few places higher, as now we would have a lot more experience and cohesiveness in working together as a team, on top of all the individual knowledge we have accumulated from our studying. Since the A team had 3 seniors that graduated this year, our school's attendance next year is fully determined by the performance of a completely new A team. And I'll take this opportunity to maybe introduce the members that will be a part of the A team for next year. Returning from this year's iteration of the A team is rising senior Edward Lee, who has been an integral part of the current A team in handling history questions while also playing a role as a humanities generalist in other big subjects like RMPSS and literature. In addition, we have rising seniors Brian Bach and Thomas Song, who are history and science specialists respectively, and I hope that they can continue to study their strong fields while also learning to branch out into other subcategories that might pique their interest. Last but not least is rising sophomore Woo Jun Kim, who is an impressive literature player who has a lot of potential in STEM categories as far as I can tell. I was a part of the tryout process this year alongside club president and teammate Ryan Kim, and we believe that moving forward, this is the strongest roster we can field in order to emulate the success that we have been having over the past year and a half. Next year, I hope that not just SIS, but also Seoul Foreign School and Korea International School can consider attending HSNCT or even PACE NSC, as I would consider the experience to be one of the greatest highlights of high school for me. Being able to scrim against top teams in the nation, such as Unilab, the day before the tournament, and playing an insanely long series of matches against other strong teams over the course of 2 days was an unforgettable experience, and I hope other teams in Korea can undergo such an experience as well.
All right, thanks so much for coming on, and good luck next year. So finally, we have Lo Young and Tony Fu from the Hua-Chong Institution in Singapore. So are you guys the only major team in Singapore, or are there any other teams that compete with you guys on a local circuit?
There are a few teams that compete in the local circuit too, but compared to of course like the USA, there are way less teams here in Singapore lah. So mainly it would be Singapore American School, who has been in the circuit for probably around like 8 or 9 years now. And also Raffles Institution, which is also another government school here in Singapore. Yeah. And other than that, there are also a few like international schools that have played in some tournaments, and mainly we play in NAQT tournaments. Yeah.
So how has the circuit in Singapore like progressed over the years?
Well, I think as what Loyan mentioned just now, I think mainly the Criswell circuit here is based primarily amongst the international schools, right? So for the local schools like us, there really are only like us and Raffles who are competing, and in terms of progression, I think our school was one of the first like local Singaporean schools to participate in Criswell, and we started doing that about 3-4 years ago, I think. So it's really quite the scene's quite nascent, and Raffles only joined like last year or 2 years before that. But I think at first we only started participating in IHBB, so that's International History and Bowl. We didn't really branch out to the other aspects yet, but over the years we've started participating more in like NAQT tournaments and as well as like ACF mirrors as well. And this year, obviously, since everything went online, we were able to participate in more tournaments as well. So I think we're on an upwards trajectory. Yeah.
Yeah, so speaking of online tournaments, you performed really well at the Asian Online Schools tournament where you got second. So have there been large-scale events like that in Asia before?
That was the
Yeah.
first. Yeah, you wanna go ahead?
That was the first one that was, I guess, hosted. I guess not affiliated to any QT. So in 2018 and 2019, there were actually like Asian championships that are hosted by any QT, but this is the first year that they're using like a different packet hosted by another party. Yeah.
And like we've also been regularly going to the IHBB Asian Championships, which happen each year. It didn't happen this year, but those are organized by IAC quite consistently and participating in like IGB and IHBB and all those kinds of things.
Yeah, and you guys also played in an American online tournament when you played Raft, where you even beat national powerhouse Thomas Jefferson. And like, how did those compare to the fields that you usually play in Asia?
They're definitely way more difficult because in Asia, I think Criswell teams also do not take it as, I guess, as seriously or train as, I guess, frequent. I mean, it depends lah, but in general, compared to the teams in the US circuit, yeah, the teams here, a lot of us are not as are not as good at it. Yeah, because it's not really part of like the culture is still not really like very established here. So it was
And
definitely
also
a challenge
just
when we played the other teams during the tournament.
And also just to go off on like a bit of a tangent on like the question difficulty. Actually when they adapt a lot of question sets to play in Singapore, or in Asia for the matter, they tend to Asianize it, which means that there tend to be like obscure American history questions or American literature questions or anything related to American affairs in your usual American sets. And what they tend to do is they Asianize it and they replace it with questions pertaining to Asia to make it easier for us and more relatable for us. So that's what they kind of do here. So when we participate in like American tournaments, obviously it's more difficult for us because that area, that field of knowledge is slightly more unfamiliar to us.
Yeah, like Asianization is quite similar to something like Britishization. Yeah, for packets that are going to UK. Yeah.
So are you guys planning to go to HSNTT next year?
Well, we're actually graduating this year, so you won't get to play. I'm not sure if our juniors in school are going to play. But I think there have been Asian teams going to HSNT. Last year was Seoul, right? I think Seoul
Seoul
went.
International. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
they went to HSNT last year, so
right
now
maybe
more Asian teams will go.
We're also not like qualified to go for HSNCT. So I mean we've got to see lah. Maybe the junior team could like consider it lah.
Yeah, all right. So thanks guys for coming out, and good luck in college next year and for your team next year.
This concludes our podcast, and thanks for tuning in. Once again, we hope you enjoyed the podcast and learned something new about smaller circuits across the world and maybe some new ways to bring schools into pyramidal Quiz Bowl. If you have any feedback or suggestions on future podcasts, please contact us. You can reach us via qbhour@gmail.com or by Discord. Have a great rest of the summer.